start this meeting. This is I believe, formally a meeting of the Finance Committee of the Council, but our agenda tonight is Education Liaison Meeting, and very happy to have representatives from the Board of Ed to talk about their budget and our superintendent of schools. One thing to explain, because this is a Finance Committee, which is why I'm in this seat, very temporarily. Mayor is here as well as the rest of members of the council. We do not have name tags today, so I will remind everybody to identify themselves when speaking. And we won't be doing roll calls. This is a less formal meeting than we normally have. And let me just, so we're going to receive a presentation from our superintendent, and we're very eager to hear about the budget. And I was going to say, just as a preliminary note, I think that, everybody in this room is here with very similar goals. And, we all care about our town, we all care about our schools. And I think we all also have a real concern to sort of examine our budget with an equity lens. And what, we certainly understand and respect the board's role. And, we hope there certainly shouldn't be any conflict in those roles. But we do have, and the balancing of our budget, there are two sides to it. There's the spending and there's the taxing. And especially right now, and just to understand, you see our deliberations, which we won't talk about a lot today. We have a zero grand list growth this year. So pretty much, we hope there'll be more in the future, but right now we're pretty much stuck with whatever we increase our budget is going to be directly impacting our taxes. And we're also living under the most recent reval, which, if people recall, had the biggest impact on our more affordable homes. That's nothing that we can control, but in fact, the tax increases, we tried to delay it a little bit, precisely because really where it was hitting was many of our most vulnerable families. And so, we hope as we have this discussion, we all understand we're all trying to do the best for the children and families, and there is that balance there. And again, you're going to hear it from us. It's kind of our role here, but we have that big concern over the taxes that we're certainly going to have to raise. There's no question about that. But the more we can minimize that, the better for, again, all families in West Hartford, but again, particularly our most vulnerable. So, but again, we also are proud of our schools. So with that, I will turn it over to start. I know we have a lot of questions, but certainly we want you to start off with your presentation.
Thank you very much, very much. It's an honor to be before all of you. Good afternoon. Lorna Thomas Farquharson, I'm Chair of the Board of Education, and I'm here with my esteemed Vice Chair, Shannon Marimone. The reason I just wanted to first greet you all officially is, again, as you well stated, we all are here because we are invested in our town, and we know there are many parts to the town that support these efforts, and we certainly know that includes the families and children within the town as well. And so we know as Board of Education members, we have three primary charges. One of them is to issue the budget. The second is issue policy, and the third is to ensure that we have a superintendent in place. So that's why I wanted to kick off, because this is quite an honor. This is the first time our superintendent is in this position as it relates to our budget. And so he certainly is not unfamiliar to all of you, but this is his first time in this way, in this role that is, and we're very honored to have him with us. And with our charge as Board of Education members, it is to govern. We know it is to govern. However, when it comes to the day-to-day management and administrative duties, that is where we rely on our superintendent and the executive team. So for that purpose, it is all fitting for him to present this information to you. And his teammates continue to come on board. And so with that, we do have, as you see, a slide presentation, but also we have hard copies for you as well. So we'll pass these out for you to review, and I will pass the mic over to our teammate, our Superintendent, Paul Vicinas.
Thank you, Lorna. Thank you, Finance Committee, for the invitation to share my budget with you this evening, Madam Mayor and all town councilors. A real pleasure to be able to collaborate. And I appreciate the comments. I'll kind of jump right in regarding your goals, and your goals specifically to looking at the compilation of the town budget, certainly with the Board of Education budget being a significant component of that, and looking at that through the lens of equity and our most vulnerable families. These numbers, I'm certain, are familiar to you. This comes from the presentation that our esteemed town manager, Rick Ledwith, gave, demonstrating, the initial proposal on the town side at 5.4, our budget at a 5.8 percent increase, basically, close to flat funding on capital to create a general overall 5.4 for the town budget. In terms of themes and in terms of what's behind the 5.8 that I want to talk about, it is very specifically with that equity lens in mind. It is very specifically with our most vulnerable families, because the themes that I shared with our Board of Education when I presented this and the public at large had to do with drivers for our budget that are very much grounded in support for specialized populations and special programs, specifically what I would deem certainly most vulnerable families. They're also driven by some unfunded mandates from the state of Connecticut, which I share as part of our charge in terms of being able to provide high quality, free public education to all, but the challenges that are within that. And I share that, and I'll share some information because I've had the opportunity to do some research on our budget. We're at the median for our DIRG with that 5.8, and I know that 5.8 is a number that's larger than most likely what we're accustomed to, but that's not specific to West Hartford, and it's certainly not a dramatic difference from our DIRG average at all, and we are right there at our median with 19 towns in our DIRG reporting at this time. The most important theme, though, I want us to keep in mind, because I also think that it aligns with what you started with, Mr. Chairperson, which is kind of why we're here. And we know that the town council is a great supporter of our schools and our town and our community. It's the return on investment that I hope to be able to highlight, but I certainly want to make sure that at the end of the day, I give you a good picture of some of those drivers and some of the very judicious decisions that have gone into the creation of this budget. You're familiar with our Board of Education goals, and I'm not going to read them, but I wanted to make a reference to a quote that our mayor made at the very excellent State of the Town address that was given. And Madam Mayor, you quoted Shaquille O'Neal, and you said that education is not a singular act; it's a habit. You are what you repeatedly do. And I know what we repeatedly do here in this district relative to education is provide for high quality educational programming that has a vast array of supports for all students, that pays particular attention to the arts, to just outstanding athletics with state titles and quarterfinals and all kinds of things, and an exceptionally high achievement. It is in this vein that is what we are seeking to continue. The budget that I will share with you this evening does not add nor hide unnecessary fat. You will see that what we are attempting to do is preserve the things that make West Hartford Public Schools the excellent schools that they are, and the excellent contributor to this community that I expect you would say that they are. And I'll seek to demonstrate that through the presentation. Some quick comments, about who we serve. There are 9,100 students in district, pre-K to post-secondary. That number actually increases to slightly over 9,300 when you include our out-of-district placements, our magnet schools, and things. And we've had a lot of conversation at the board table over the last several years about a decreasing enrollment. we're actually at a phase where we have a 1% increase in our overall enrollment this year as compared to last year. And while we see certainly smaller numbers at our elementary, where that enrollment bubble lives currently is in our middle schools. And that's part of a driver that I'll share. But you're aware of the rich diversity that exists in terms of the number of students who at home speak a language other than English. What you may not be aware of is that we increased, among them, not certainly all of them, but among those 2,500 students, we have this year just under 800 students who are identified as English language learners. And that's up 100 students from last year. That is significant. That is a 13 percentage point increase in that subpopulation. We are up 150 students among those who qualify for free and reduced lunch, which I think speaks to your point about wanting to be, judicious with our decision making as it relates to finances, but also as it relates to educational programming for those students and the supports that we can provide. We are up just shy of 200 students from last year for students who receive special education services, a 10.5% increase for that population. And between ESOL and special education, these are significant drivers that you will see in the budget overall. Just quickly in terms of return on investment, and I'll leave that up there. I tried to capture a little bit of something from every level, and really areas both academic and co-curricular, extracurricular, with things to add that I can certainly, things within the last week. We've been recognized by Edutopia for a second time, and they'll be coming out to Whiting Lane School to film there for educational best practice to be broadcast on their national platform. We've won another state championship in hockey most recently. We've gold medaled in unified basketball in addition to soccer within the last week. So the list of accomplishments, and all of these accomplishments on the page here, all from this year alone. I mean, we can go back. There's a significant return on investment for what we do in our schools. But what caught me was really the point of pride I heard, and this was an amazing statistic, that West Hartford being the 5th most searched town nationally on Zillow for where families come to live. It is the educational system that I would say is a significant driver to families choosing to come and seeking us out. And it was even the comment that made that students know about our drama programs, our music programs nationally. So this return on investment cannot be understated, and I share that simply in the spirit of what we're trying to preserve within this budget. At the end of the day, our budget is in and around people, as you know. 82% of the $200 million budget is all tied to salaries and benefits. We have a roll forward budget that I'll talk about, where we start in terms of our budgeting process to say, if we were to maintain essentially all of our programs, all of our classroom teachers, and just start from, okay, across the 20 different bargaining units we have, across the 2,500 different employees that we have, if we rolled forward with what is the step and wage increase for next year, and then from that, what are the reductions we may be making, whether that's for changes in enrollments, whether that's for cuts that we need to make, et cetera, et cetera. That is the way in which the budget itself was put together. Anything that we want to do to make any significant adjustments to that budget will mean finding ways, for us as a Board of Education to deliberate and talk about, impact to programming, because there's no necessarily big ads that I would want to mention. But this is a little bit more detailed than what was shared at the Board of Education meeting. So I'll talk about this for a moment. And this is really just to give you a picture of how things are changing. We know that ESSER has gone away. In the presentation of our budget, we did not include really any information about ESSER, but it is significant to understand that In terms of the number of individuals that are standing up in front of children today and supporting their education, this budget proposes a grand total of just under 40 fewer positions. A number of them, 31 and 3/4, were previously funded under the ESSER, and we had a planned reduction that went from there. What you can see is out of those 31 positions, we will propose to maintain 9 of them. Of those 9, 2 speak to the increase in enrollment at the middle school. One speaks to continuation of our teacher in residence program, specific to our efforts to support diversity within education and our educators that are in front of children. And 6 of those positions are in direct service to our special populations group. We also propose to add 5 new positions to the budget, all within special education, in support of things like our intensive academic program, speech and language, 2 resource teachers at our middle school, and our school engagement program. And then a grand total of 23.58 positions are being eliminated from the budget that range all over the map in terms of what they are, for a net decrease of 10.63 positions. This is significant because I have heard from families, interestingly, the charge that we're facing right now is not a charge so much to cut as it is to add. I did a quick count of emails before I came here. I have at least 15 emails from elementary families that are concerned about class size and want to add a position, and I have 10 for a home to school liaison, and that's not even counting. We had added in elementary counselors and had to make the very difficult decision to not continue them in this budget. So as you can see, beginning with the 23-24 adopted budget as our baseline, which excludes all of the ESSER funding. We passed a budget last year with your support for just over $190 million. We would see a 6% increase just from roll forward, just from preserving what we have. We would add to that $835,000 for the 9 positions under ESSER that we'd like to maintain. From there, I identified just over $1 million in reductions total to land us at the 5.8 increase, the increase of roughly $11 million, bringing us to a budget proposal of $201.3 million. Just to see a quick breakdown of that, here are our drivers. Between salary and benefits, we see an average increase between 5% and 6%. Now, as a board, the board has already seen the town manager's presentation, and we're aware as well of the favorable healthcare premium adjustments. So that's something that the board has asked that I address with them at the upcoming board workshop. So we do anticipate that we will make an adjustment in that line. Transportation, tuition, and utilities represent a significant driver here within the budget. And this speaks to the piece of both the increase within special education students, which I know I mentioned a number, but that increase also forms significant outplacements based on the unfunded mandate. There was a change as of July 1 that said students who are in our post-secondary program who require additional education and who previously qualified through the 22nd year of birth, so when they turned age 22, they aged out and would be dismissed from school. And so that could have happened kind of as a rolling exit. The law changed to say that those students have the right to be educated through the full school year. And that law came out on July 1 and effective for July 1 with little warning. It required that we add a position back into the budget that we had programmed for elimination, and it requires that we sustain and continue those. In addition, obviously, while there was excellent news that the town manager shared about the increase to the educational cost sharing, there's bad news on my side relative to flat funding for the excess cost grant. And I know some of you have familiarity with excess cost, but just for a quick explanation, for students that require specialized programming, in any instance where the cost of funding exceeds 4.5 times the average per pupil expenditure, the statute indicated that the state would typically provide for 100% of that. Now, obviously, the state, I think we all know, has never been able to provide at that level, which I understand. It's a function of the financial times. They went to a tiered system where the students, the communities that had the least wealth would be funded at 91%. The communities sort of in the mid-range for wealth would be funded at 88%, and the communities that had the most wealth would be funded at 85%. West Hartford was in that 85 tier last year, but the funding was insufficient to provide 85. We got 74%. Unfortunately, this year, that fund is again flat funded, and we have been told to anticipate 68%. So that's a $1.5 million shortfall from the 85%. It's a $2.5 million shortfall from the full 100% if the state was able to fully fund it. And again, with the increase that we have in our special education population, we're seeing those needs, and that's the significant driver that's behind really transportation, tuition, and utilities line, and you see essentially a 1.5 million increase there. The other one, other expenses, the big driver here, and I think there was a similar driver within your town budget, had to do with the workman's comp and really the general liability insurance increases based on, I think the term is claim experience, which is to see what we're seeing in terms of our needs under claims in that regard. So that's really the big explanation of what are the things that are driving this budget, and where are they. So at the end, we do have that $11 million increase. I was very excited to see, as Mr. Ledwith demonstrated, that increase ECS funding, which really is a part of your budget, not mine, just to contextualize sort of a net tax impact for us. But in general, we're looking at a 5.8, $201 million proposal. With that, I certainly have slides if they're of interest for you in terms of the efficiencies that we try to create relative to our per pupil expenditure, where we land. And there's just one quote I want to make on this. This shows kind of where West Hartford has been over the last 50 years from a per pupil expenditure stance. We were previously certainly the highest. I believe we were never number one, but I believe we were number two somewhere there in the 70s. We've gone down as far as 130th out of 169. You can see we're more comfortably there, which places us in the bottom third of all districts in the state of Connecticut. And I share that. Our average per pupil spending remains for the last decade in the bottom third, and yet for that same period of time, we remain in the top third in terms of our state achievement on our state math and literacy assessments. So again, it speaks to the return on investment that we expect that we are able to provide for the funds and to help create the draw to this district. So I'll close with that and regain my seat here, and I'm sure between myself, my board chair, and our vice chair, we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. And of course, Ben Winograd, chair of this committee, and of course, I immediately broke the rule that I established immediately. So thank you for the presentation. And you sort of skipped over, and I appreciate, the 5.8, of course, is the line that we're looking at. We don't dock you for the excess lacking from the state. It is what it is, and it is, when that fund goes down, it's our problem, right? In the sense of figuring out how to deal with the tax situation. So, but certainly, it's a good explanation. I know we have a lot of questions, but these answered some of them. My first question was going to be, in fact, about the actual positions that we were all searching through the budget trying to add those up. So thank you for that. You anticipated that question. So let me open it up to other council members, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Deb Poland, member of this committee. Thank you so much for this presentation, and I did also watch the presentation online and the budget workshop as well, and appreciate trying to learn more about this. And also, just to add some context, like, we have this same kind of meeting with all of the other departments that are funded through the town. So, in fact, we had one just this morning where we all asked questions, what's this proposal and what's that? So please take these questions in that light, that these are the same kinds of questions that we ask about other departments. And I just wanted to ask you a little bit about the proposed move from curriculum specialists to assistant principals at the elementary school. And like why this year is the right year for that, and what some of the reasons are behind that, and what you project the increased expenditures to be. Thanks.
I very much appreciate that question, because I'll start with the administrative restructure I'm proposing will be an increased, will not be an increased expenditure, will come with a cost savings, and I believe the figure is in the neighborhood of $43,000 or $45,000, if I have that correct from memory. We do currently have 11 curriculum specialists that work across our 11 elementary schools, one per school. And they are just incredibly talented and dedicated individuals that really help support the running of the school. They help support teachers in terms of providing kind of coaching, things that are outside of the evaluation lens. They provide different support in terms of student data meetings. We call them student success teams. And they can at times certainly also help with some of the logistics. Some of them may help work on scheduling. Some of them may help work on, resolving a minor student discipline type issue, et cetera. With the coming out of the pandemic, we had utilized our ESSER funds to put in elementary school counselors to deal with a lot of we saw dramatic increases in student dysregulation. We saw dramatic increases in chronic absenteeism. We were having a lot of student issues, and we knew we needed an additional set of hands that can work on that. With the ESSER funds sunsetting, And while we've seen some rebounding with student behaviors, we knew we needed to really have an opportunity to re-examine and relook at the structure that we have at the elementary level to provide a greater amount of direct student support. And that model really is kind of what our secondary schools have relative to an assistant principal. So we've faced some concerns over the years that some of the work that our curriculum specialists have been asked to do more and more start to come outside of the teacher contract and start to go more into the administrative contract. So we took a hard look at that, especially related to this very specific need. We're also seeing a great need relative to the increase in the number of 504s and the number of PPTs, parent planning and placement team meetings for our special education students. And so we needed a role that was more focused in and around student support. And that position is the elementary principal. So we looked out at what other districts are doing. Approximately 27% of the districts in the state of Connecticut do have some form of an assistant principal model at the elementary schools, and a significant number of schools in and around this DIRG have that model. So we said, all right, how can we do this in such a way that it's not cost prohibitive? And so there's obviously, we take out those 11 positions, we put in 11 positions, those are at a higher rate, but we're working on that in a 10-month plan, so they wouldn't be year-round. And then we looked at our which is kind of like our department supervisor model at the secondary level. They're a 10-month employee versus a 12-month. And then we looked at our department supervisors. And we have generally have had 2 department supervisors for the majority of the academic content areas, so world language, science, social studies, math, and English. We made the very hard decision to eliminate 3 of those positions, going down to a single department supervisor for social studies, science, and world language. And then we also looked at our pupil services department, expecting that we would have a greater amount of support at the elementary level, while not, total support, but we felt that we can reduce close to 1. It was technically a 0.9 department supervisor from pupil services. And with that, we also looked to add an assistant director. Because our population is growing at such a pace, it's difficult for us within special education to do the real high quality work that we need to do relative to program review and finding efficiencies within pupil services, because everything in pupil services at the end of the day becomes mandated. But if we're not doing a close examination of the services that we're providing and finding efficiencies, financial efficiencies within that, that still provides the students the high level of services that they deserve, expect, required by law, then those costs can begin to grow without control. So the combination of all those things became the need. And then on the personnel side, just based on who was retiring, what position might have just been vacated by someone and not yet filled, they got a different position, who was eligible to be able to compete for these positions. The timing was just right from a personnel side as well. So at the end of the day, I believe it was a reduction of, I know it's 4 department supervisors, the 11 curriculum specialists, the addition of the 11 assistant principals, and the creation of the assistant director. And I do want to say it was I believe it was a $43,000 savings, or perhaps a 48, somewhere in there. I could look at my notes and get a more accurate number for you.
Okay, super complicated, and I appreciate that. I mean, we were looking through, we were able to identify that it looked like it was going to cost about $600,000 to switch over to the assistant principals, but then the elimination of these department supervisors is also part of your restructure. And I guess my only follow-up question on that is, since these assistant principals would not be part of the teacher contract, are there additional benefits that they might be eligible for, like a deferred compensation plan, contributions to that teachers might not get? I just don't know how that contract works.
No, the deferred compensation, let me think about that for half a second. I know that the total salary and benefits line, in terms of the bottom line of the 43,000 savings, that constitutes salary, benefits, the whole piece. Off the top of my head, I can't speak to if there's a dollar for dollar value with that specific benefit, but I can get you that answer, Deb.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
What was that, Rick? I don't think you're on the mic, so.
So the administrators do, and I don't remember the exact dollar amount.
You bet it.
As Paul said, it was, superintendent said it sounds like it was built into their formula, but administrators do get an annuity. So assistant principals get maybe $4,000, a principal gets $5,000. I forget the exact dollar amount, but there is an annuity portion of the 403 benefit.
But that would be built into the
Built in.
line.
It sounds like it was built in, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Carol Blanks. Oh,
Actually, if you could, hold on. I want to do committee members first, just to, thank you.
It's,
Mark. That's right, Mark. So that's a good idea. Mark was unable to make it tonight, had an incredibly good excuse. It's a award ceremony going on for gymnastics at the,
probably running.
probably
Probably track.
Probably track, yeah, right, well, yeah. Well, not I mean, yeah, not gymnastics. Right? So he had a couple of questions. There's one on the assistant principal, on the ranking, which I don't really understand that one. Let me, he has a question on the salary increases. What's the differential between union contract increases and additional salaries? Salary increases historically were between 2% and 3%. Why such a large increase this year? With yet another reduction in student population, which I think you addressed. And coming off 3 years of intensive mental health focus with additional staffing to meet student needs at the time through ESSER funds. Additionally, more of these students have been outplaced, potentially reducing the services required. Where's the improvements over the last 3 years with all the additional special needs spending that was pledged to show improvement? And then he had a question on ESSER funding that I think a couple of the questions I think did get answered. But I think I think the primary question there, I think, is, again, if you could explain on the salary increases.
Certainly. So, and I did hear something about outplacements and a reduction from an outplacement. So I just want to correct that for everyone. When a student requires outplacement, and generally we're talking about students that are medically fragile, who may require care beyond a school day, may require, residential treatment, things, just services that we're unable to provide within the school. That is not at a cost savings. That those costs are significant. That is within the tuition line that I spent a fair amount of time going over. And we are seeing an increase in the number of folks who are moving into West Hartford, and within our residents in general, students who require these services. We've become a destination district in that regard, perhaps, but because we will see students who move in who have a plan already, which is a legally binding contract with a family that says, my child's already been identified, my former district has identified that we require these services. We are legally obligated to honor that plan when they move in. We cannot say, oh, hold on, we want to do a reevaluation of you. We do a reevaluation, but it's nothing that we can create an obstacle for up front. And over the course of the year, we had some significant conversation at the board table in and around this, because it is a driver within our budget. It is something where we're seeing significant increase. And we've brought back, I believe the number was 32 students over the last couple of years. So that, when put into context, has created a dramatic cost savings for us. But we have seen a continued increase in the number of students. We've seen a continued increase from those providers in the costs of those services. And we've seen reduced financial support for that in terms of the excess cost. So I did want to just make sure that it was understood that if we outplace a student, we are not kind of off the hook in any way, shape, or form. In terms of the salary increases, and that was, as I recall, I'll pull it back up, or I'll just open the packet that you have. I believe it was salary and benefits. And so that's the reason why. One of the drivers behind that. Oh, they are in two separate categories. Okay, so the 5.5 and the 6.1. The 5.5, the increase on that overall, in terms of the detail of that, part of that is we know that we've seen, I would expect, a lot of news about the teacher shortage. So while we always endeavor to when we're looking for folks, we always have an eye towards, hey, if we can get students that are coming right new into the profession, we do well with that when you look at that overall. But That's not to say that we haven't faced shortages, and we've seen that. And that was a question I know that came up at the board table, and it was specific to a department. One of the board members was asking, "Hey, how come in this particular department the increase was so significant?" And that had to do really with the tenure of those individuals. Because we are hiring a greater number of folks in some of our specialized programming and related services, those folks typically have a greater amount of schooling. Oftentimes, we're competing for a very narrow field. We're getting folks that might be more career mid-range, but I can get that broken down for you. But then at the end of the day, there's a salary and wage increase overall, and that line cuts across all of our different content, not just classroom teachers. That's cutting across our paraprofessionals, our secretarial union, our custodians, et cetera. But if I can get, if that's not a sufficient answer, we can certainly try to look for some breakdown for a greater explanation.
Thank you, and I'm sure Minority Leader Zdanowicz will watch this on tape, and if he has further questions, I'm sure he'll feel free to contact you. Councilor Blanks, did you?
Only if no other committee member has a question. So, no? Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, Carol Anderson Blanks, Town Councilor. Thank you, Paul, and thank you, board members, for joining us this evening. It's always a pleasure to see you. So just a kind of a piggyback to Councilor Poland's question in terms of the curriculum specialist moving up to the assistant principal. And I, too, saw your presentation and then also went through the book. So I just need some more clarification in terms of the additional requirements or functions and expectations. And then the other question I had for you, going from the specialist position into the vice principal, are there some certifications that are required and ongoing professional development? And is that an added cost, into the budget or throughout the year? So if you can just elaborate on that, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. So I'll start with the tail end of that question. There is a difference in certification. All of our administrators need what's called an 092 certification, which is a certification under supervision and evaluation. That is not an additional cost. That is the individual who would be applying for the position have the responsibility on their own to go ahead and obtain that certification if they're interested. It does speak to, however, the earlier question about the timing. Of the 11 curriculum specialists that are currently employed, 8 of the 11 have their 092. Of the 3 who do not, 2 are retiring this year. So all but 1 of our curriculum specialists will have the ability, if they're interested in this new position, to be able to apply for the position. And obviously with their skill sets would be I would expect would be good candidates. But the position itself is very different from what they're doing to pick up on, and just in terms of the professional development, teachers and administrators do require by statute a certain number of hours, but our systems that we have in place, both with our curriculum and staff improvement Wednesdays, as well as for our administrators, we have something called extended leadership that we do 3 times per year, plus once at the beginning of the year, where they are able to clock all of their required professional learning hours just as part of how we do business. So absolutely no additional costs for that. In terms of those responsibilities, as I mentioned, the student regulation and pieces, that's a significant piece of it. Sitting in on planning and placement team meetings, working directly with students, having more of that interface on discipline-related issues, and kind of even prior to discipline, just management with the students. Certainly teacher evaluation, which has been a big piece. We've, over the last several years, we've kind of piecemealed different administrators, some of whom may have been at a secondary level, Years ago, we used to have 2 elementary principals on special assignment, 2 elementary principals whose only job it was to go and support the other elementary principals at the schools relative to evaluation and supervision, and then they did some other programming for us. That came out of the budget quite a while ago, over 10 years ago. It's definitely a need, but it was a nice to have in terms of the dollars. So we've been piecing that together with several of our administrators having to say leave their primary school and focus part of the time, couple of days a week, and travel to our larger elementaries to support with the evaluation of teachers. And now with assistant principals in place, that alleviates that need, which also enables us to kind of look at the thinning of some of the department supervisors and some of the other pieces. There's a host of other responsibilities in terms of the logistics, the creation of a schedule, things that prior were not necessarily specified. Each school may have done things slightly differently, but now as an administrator, there's a whole different set of expectations that we can ask for without any concern for are we going to run into kind of a contractual dispute. And the biggest piece that I failed to mention that I did want to mention, what that does is we take our elementary principals who are kind of a one-person leadership team, not to say that they don't rely on their reading specialists, their curriculum specialists, but the kind of buck stopped with them. They didn't really have another administrative support in that way. And while they're both as the evaluator and the leader of the building are expected to be the instructional leader, that instructional leadership oftentimes can get pulled away from, I've got a PPT to sit in on, I've got a difficult student situation and I need to call back the families, I've got a truancy referral I need to make, I've got a fire drill I need to plan, all these very important responsibilities, but their time became divided and some of the instructional leadership could get diluted. And now they will be positioned as having a much greater focus on the instructional leadership and allow their assistant principal kind of just a better division of labor, and the labor that we're trying to divide is more appropriately placed, because not only are they in the instructional leader, they're also the lead evaluator. So kind of those two responsibilities often go hand in hand with each other, and it wasn't something that you could ask a curriculum specialist to do with any backing of authority. So I hope that answers.
Thank you. Ms. Councilor Fay.
Yes, thank you. Excuse me. I always look forward to this night. It's Mary Fay. Nice to see you guys again. Education, of course, is the most, if not second to public safety, gosh, that we provide here. So I appreciate that. I guess I have a couple of questions about some of the, I actually have a few questions I'd like to ask if I may. I'll ask them one at a time because they're in different directions here. Just about the benefits, and I probably have questions on the town budget too, Rick, about this. Benefits are up 6.1%. I thought by putting people in the partnership, Connecticut Partnership Insurance Plan, those numbers were going to start to flatten or level out or come down, or, we wouldn't be seeing that bump. So can you tell me what that's a result of, please? Certainly.
I would share first and foremost, I do believe that while 6% may look high relative to what we're hopeful for, and we've seen some strong years and we've seen some rougher years. I'm aware from talking to other superintendents, specifically those that are self-insured, that they're seeing increases greater than that for many of them. I know that when we started the budget process much earlier on in the year, we were looking at a 10% potential premium increase. We received information that was come down to a 7%, and then we had eventually landed on 5%. My understanding is, my understanding is that it has come down favorably from there. But I will break down budget for you a little bit. The healthcare premium in the state partnership plan did land at a 5% for dental, did land at a 5% for Medigap, is at a 2% for current employees, it's at a 3% for retired employees, and then we have something called the Other Post-Employment Benefit Reserve. And we do have we've had to draw from that reserve for other, for post-employment benefits for folks when they retire. And so we will be, programming a contribution into that. But as I mentioned quickly, I don't know that we've calculated, and we haven't had the opportunity, even as a board, to talk about this, but, Lorna had certainly heard Rick's presentation and understood that the 5% that we based, the 5% increase, which is the main driver, that brings, there's other smaller pieces in it that brings it up to a 6.1. We're expecting we're going to be able to come down from that based on this favorable updated estimate from the state partnership plan. So we need to go back and have that conversation at our second budget workshop, but I expect that we'll realize some savings, and we'll be coming out of our second budget workshop with some form of an amendment.
Great. And I probably should mention, since everybody else did, I am not on this committee, but I was for the prior 6 years, so been through this before. Could you please, let's see, tell me what the scores are trending over the past, I don't know, whatever you can remember, 3-5 years? Are they continuing to go up, high school, middle school, elementary in reading and math, or are they flattened, or are they declining? I haven't been paying attention to those trends,
sure.
quite honestly. Thank you.
Well, I'll certainly tell you at the high school level, our high schools continue to simply excel. We are top 3% in the country for high schools in terms of our overall standing as published by U.S. News and World Report, which use those figures. That's a combination not only of our SAT scores, our advanced placement. We took gold medal honors for advanced placement this year, which is a new designation and something that was, for us, not a difficult bar. That's been a place where we've been a leader, not just locally, but nationally. At our middle and high school, I would tell you that our trend for both literacy and mathematics specifically, Tom Moore, my predecessor, had named mathematics an area of focus back in 2015-16. And we had seen growth up to our highest scores ever in both areas in the 2018-19 school year. And that high water mark is our bar. So we're setting the bar at the highest performance we've ever seen. At that time, I believe our math was, we had closed the gap with our DIRG, and we had a modest gap with our literacy. Our literacy had been strong, but had stayed flat and strong. With the pandemic, like everyone else, first you had a year where there was no state testing, then you had a year where the state testing was given, but the scores were not reported publicly. And then in the first year of testing, we had a 95% rebound to our previous scores, and we held about there last year at that 95% rebound, which when I first analyzed the data, I was a little bit disappointed in that. And what we typically do with all of our assessment data is we'll disaggregate it based on. First, we'll look at it overall, but then we look at it relative to our high needs population. And our high needs population, as defined by the state of Connecticut, is students with disabilities, English language learners, and students who participate in free and reduced lunch. And what it was, when you look at the individual categories, you actually either see stable performance or growth for both the high needs group and the non-high needs group, but the density of the high needs group having increased made our district average overall be slightly lower. And so it's evidence to the fact that we have, as I stated those numbers, we have nearly 200 more students with disabilities just this year alone. We have 150 more students who qualify for free and reduced lunch. We have more than 100, or just under 100, excuse me, we have 94 more English language learners. Those populations are growing, and therefore the need to preserve and support and enhance the programming for those students has never been more critical.
And then my last question, excuse me, for those of you who have been here before, this is more in response to our responsibilities for taxpayers, but how many children do we have from, I think it's Project Open Choice, do I have that right? And then what is the state level of reimbursement for those children? Thank you.
That is an excellent question, and I'm glad you asked. In my budget book, I believe it's on page, it's in the data supplement, I believe it's on page 33. Let me just look quickly. No. Page 33 doesn't, I don't think it, oh, that's my athletics budget. It's page 32. Page 32 of the data supplement, the very, very back of my budget book. We have current,
We don't have that.
okay, it's available online, I can get it to you guys. For the 23-24, you know, we have right now 203 students. It's listed in the data supplement as an estimate because we'll use numbers, you know, student may move out by the end of the year, so we'll have closeout numbers.
Excuse me just for a second. It's on page B3 in our book.
Oh, it's in there as well? Okay. So the thing I wanted to point out with what's in the data supplement is the tuition revenue. So the Open Choice program is a revenue source for the town and for the schools. It's not so we publish a per pupil expenditure, right? And our per pupil expenditure somewhere 19,000 and change. I don't know, maybe 19,005, 19. I had to look up the specific number, but it's not to say that we don't get a reimbursement from the state, and we don't really have a true cost. It's not a true cost. Like if you add one more student tomorrow, that doesn't increase my budget by $19,000. That's what the per pupil expenditure is. It's an average when you take the total budget and you divide by the number of students, that creates your per pupil expenditure. So the way that we accept open choice students is we always accept them at grade levels in a manner such that we're not going to create an additional section. So that is to say that every student comes over to us in West Hartford essentially as a no cost, other than the paper or the textbook that we provide them. But if I had a classroom that had 19 students, and I said I can take 2 students from Open Choice, now I have a classroom that has 21 students. There's no difference in what I need to pay that teacher. There's no difference in the operational cost for the school, in essence. So they come over in that way, and what they do is, because we are receiving monies for them, it's a revenue stream that added up for us last year just under 1.5 million, and we project for next year it will be a sum of 1.5 million. What you'll see when you can look at the data supplement, what we do with that money is we then turn around and use that money to help pay for, I would say offset, but it more than covers the costs that we have to pay when we send students out to any magnet program. These can be the Greater Hartford School for Performing Arts, the Aerospace Center, all the different CREC magnets. Now, one's an apple and one's an orange. We have a legal responsibility to pay the tuition for our students who choose to go to magnets, regardless of whether or not we take in open choice students. It's just the fact that the open choice program provides a revenue stream more than double that of the revenue stream for which or of the cost stream for which we're responsible for our own students that we're magneting out. So not only does the open choice program add great diversity for our students and our community, they also add a dramatic financial benefit to us in the budget process.
Yeah, so thank you for that. I don't understand the math. I'm a cost accountant, sorry, so I'm kind of a numbers nerd. If we have 203 kids, times our 21,000, costs us 4.3. I think we're getting 4,000 back per child. I mean, I know you're not accounting for it, and how you're doing it seems to make sense. Of course, they shouldn't be segregated. The whole purpose is for them to be, and they're great. I mean, my daughter's friends with a lot of them. I love our schools. So this is not a value judgment. This was just a numbers exercise.
Correct, but I apologize, I don't want to interrupt you. The algorithm that you're describing, maybe I give it to you a different way.
Please.
All right, so let's say that our budget, instead of saying that our budget was, whatever it is, let's say our budget was $100. That's the total cost of our budget. And we had 20 students. Our average cost per pupil for just 20 West Hartford students would be $5 per child. Let's say, hey, I can do more than 20 students. Give me 5 open choice students. So now my budget is still $100. Now I'm servicing 25 students, and my average cost per pupil is now $4. So the average cost per pupil has nothing to do with state reimbursement or anything else. What would actually happen would be, in that scenario, the state would pay me whatever, let's say they gave me $1 per child. So my budget's 100. I'm technically I have a lower cost per pupil, and I have $5 towards the 100 that the state gave me. So there's no reimbursement in the way of per pupil. That is totally separate from our budget. It's simply a revenue stream. It's simply additive. It's not based on. Without our open choice students, our pupil would actually would be higher.
Thank you. Lauren, I think you want to respond to that as well.
If I may, yes, thank you. I respect the question being asked and greatly appreciate the detailed way in which you were able to answer. And this, again, draws attention to the honor that we have as board members, again, high-level governing. So the details that you explained certainly within your purview. And just want to echo again within our purview, in terms of governing the educational system in our district, and certainly with respect to policy, the beautiful thing with open choice is that it continues to support the values and principles and vision that we have as a district. And I think that what is also so wonderful, and our students do a good job with this as well, is that although they may be identified as open choice, they're WHPS students. So when they participate in activities and field trips, all of that, no, appreciate that, but just want to, again, recognize that they're students that are part of our district, and it is something that certainly they add value to us. And so we certainly welcome them and appreciate them. Yes, there is the...
It's just the numbers. Thank you.
No, understand. I'm respecting the quantitative piece that you're speaking of, and I'm just highlighting the qualitative piece, and collectively that adds to the substance of our district. So appreciate the question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Alberto Cortez, please.
Alberto Cortez, Town Councilor. This is my least favorite time of the year. It's this meeting. The presentation was great, but I felt that it was a watered down version of what we got in the past. So, so I'm trying to put, my thoughts together, put a question together, and it's not easy, right? So I have children, I have 2 boys, one who's now out of the West Hartford school system and one currently in the West Hartford school system. And, we look at this with an equity lens, right? So we have great high schools, we have some great schools, and we have plenty of good schools, right? I'm a realtor in the state. I have families telling me I don't want to live here because I don't want my kids to go to this school, but I would love to be here because they need to go to that school. And then when you look at the scores and you look at the numbers at great schools, it shows we're only as good as as fast as our slowest runners, right? So what I would love to see is when we talk per pupil cost, right? And I know this is all high level, but when we're asking when we're looking at a 5.8 increase in taxes, the numbers matter. So what I would love to see is a per pupil cost by school, right? Because we're eliminating a lot of positions, and some of these positions would benefit in some of these schools that are good schools and not great schools, right? And we talk about return investment. Yes, we have great high schools, and a lot of these accolades come from these higher levels, right? But our younger ones, that's where we get that return on investment, right? So some of those services are not administrator services, but administrator positions, but other positions are at a lower cost. So we're going to give them their tackle box at elementary school. We're going to give them their fishing rod, and and as they move up, it's just, I think we avoid issues, especially with the vulnerable families, right, who can't advocate for their children. So if we prepare those kids better, I think it'll cost less when they're in high school. So it'd just be nice to see what that would look like. And I don't know if you probably not going to be able to give me numbers today. There's plenty of schools, so I don't expect that. And then the other thing is, are we tracking data on when we look at it from an equity lens? Children of color, right, who are doing well, throughout, and then when they get into our middle schools, high schools, they were honors children, right, and then now we take them down, because I know not just West Hartford specifically, but it happens, right, and it's like it's easier to they're struggling in this subject right now, which they never did, and then we're going to make it easier, right, for them, right? So I have personal experience with that with my son, and it's like you rob him out of an opportunity to learn, right? But I know he's not the only one, right, that this happens with, and I guess that's not a numbers thing, but I think that's the most important thing is what's per pupil in each schools, and how does that look like? Are we spending more on the good schools and less on the great schools, or vice versa? So I think those numbers are important. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate the question. I'll respectfully disagree with a lot of what you said, just to put it out there. I appreciate that our schools have differences, and I can't speak to, the realtor lens, but I can tell you amazing things that happen in all our schools, even among differences with, depending on what metrics you want to use, whether we're talking about achievement. I can look at, one of our schools, yesterday at our board meeting, we celebrated 2 teams of elementary children that are going to, I believe they're going to nationals for Odyssey of the Mind in Iowa. And that's an area, where we see a need in any school, if that's an achievement issue, if that's a culture issue, if that's a climate issue, that's where within our school strategic plan, we're talking with our principals and we're saying, hey, we need emphasis over here. You're doing good things over here, you're doing great things over here, we need emphasis over here. And in each of our schools, that's going to be a different thing. Relative to how it's budgeted, which was the main part of your question, it's the general and overall budget that a school would receive. Each school receives an allocation from our budget office. That's based on per pupil, and that's based on their number of students. So a smaller school like Morley has a smaller school budget than a larger school like Duffy. But then behind that, in the scenes, is also the staffing for pupil services and other pieces. That's all driven by student need. So if there's an increase in whether it's the number of English language learners, whether it's the number of students identified with disabilities or what have you, those needs are all programmed based on the needs of that school, based on the student population that it's facing. So I would want you to have confidence in that. That gets right down to a tutoring level and specific to an elementary. So we do a look at we give benchmark assessments in reading, mathematics, 3 times per year, once in the fall, once mid-year, and once in the spring. And we'll review that data, and then in the spring, we're making forecasts for, okay, do we need to shift any of the budgeting for our tutors in literacy or mathematics to school X, Y, or Z, just based on how that came out. So those are the ways in which, in terms of dollars, yeah, I apologize, I can't quote you, but I would want to give you that kind of a framework to understand it. But then middle school and high school, and, I certainly want to respect whatever personal, experience that you had, but I would want to share, first, the honors program itself only begins in middle school, carries its way up through high school. The charge that's given to families is, and I'm not going to claim we're always perfect at this. One of the responsibilities of my job is probably dealing with things when we don't get it perfect, and oftentimes when we've, say, really been imperfect. But we strive to be as dead on as this as we can, and we talk about always recommending children at the highest possible levels. It's been a piece I've heard about it from the community more so often at the high school. The push for AP, the push for this. But one of the things I have tracked on that I don't know that I can give you specific numbers off the top of my head, but I can tell you that over I think it was a 10-year period when I think back to my last high school advanced placement report, we had seen dramatic gains across, and the board members at the time asked me to break it down, students who were Black or Hispanic, students who were Asian, students two or more races, and students who were white. And they asked me to track, and we had seen a dramatic increase in the participation among our students of color. We had at the same time seen an increase in the percentage of students earning 3s or above, and an increase in the average score. And that had exceeded, at the same time, we did see an increase for white students in their participation, and we saw flat values. But basically what we saw was a shrinking of what I would otherwise call the achievement gap as it related to advanced placement. That's one that I know off the top of my head. I can look at literacy and mathematics as well. Because I was watching, when my previous role as assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction, I was watching a lot of the state assessment scores over the years, and I had mentioned, math was the area. We were seeing a shrinking of the gap in mathematics on our state assessments in grades 3 through 8 for students of color. I don't have specific numbers that I could kind of share with you off the top of my head, and I wouldn't shy from the fact that we have work to do there. That is a significant charge. What we find, though, I think was to your point, I think you hit on this at one point, is kind of number of years that we have students in the district. The longer we have any student in the district, generally what we find when we can track it and cohort them that way, the stronger their performance is overall. And generally what we found is it's not the race, the ethnicity, it's not the religion or anything like that. It's the high needs groups. It's whether or not they're in English, English is not their primary language and they're having to master that language. If I come new to this country in the high school and English is not my first language, and I'm not yet proficient in it, that I'm identified as an English language learner, I'm probably not going to do the greatest on the SAT. But if you give me 3 years for language acquisition, and I have the opportunity to do that again, I'm probably going to do much better. Likewise, students with disabilities, and then students who are socioeconomically disadvantaged, as evidenced by participation in free and reduced lunch program. That's deemed our high needs population, and there's intersectionality with race with that. But when you break apart our students of color's performance separate from high needs, there is a nominal gap from the all students group. Very, very small. So it's the high needs population that we're really seeking to support. And, I do definitely kind of appreciate the very true accountability and reminder, hey, superintendent, you need to continue to focus on this. Because I don't want, if that was your experience, I can only apologize. I don't want that to be your experience. I don't want it to be anyone's experience. I want the expectation to remain high.
If I can just add, So yeah, so I appreciate the answer. Some of that data, again, they're not numbers, but they equate to numbers. So when we look at what we champion, I think those are good things to bring to highlight so we can see. So again, we're talking about a return on investment. That's what it is education, and I think that matters. And like I said, I struggle to, based on this presentation, it was very, very, very high level, and some of the stuff you discussed can be thrown in there in a high level way, and when we can kind of make sense of it. Again, I always struggle with this time of year just because my son has friends and, parents, and, I talk to people in the town, I'm involved, and, it's not always the same story we hear today. And I know sometimes as parents don't know how to advocate. So like, I advocate for my son. You don't hear from me because I do it through the school system. I go through the proper channels, but not everybody's capable of doing that. And so the ask of the per pupil in each school, that's the thing. Does it equate like it's, if we broke it down, is there a gap that we can see there?
No, I appreciate the feedback. I'm happy to, to look at what I can add into the presentation for all of you, so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions? No? Mayor.
Thank you. We have to put this on or whatever. Oh my God, this thing is like, whoa. Hi, thank you again for being in this. Sherry Cantor, Mayor. Just a couple of quick questions. When we were remember the before days, before the pandemic, we used to receive about between $750,000, $900,000 surplus from the Board of Education. And the understanding of that for years, was about a decade at least that was happening, was that the budget, you have to build in some cushion because there's too much legal risk for the board, for everybody. You can't run at a deficit. And you can't create revenue, right? So you have to build in some. So knowing that as a fact and talking with previous leadership, that has to happen. There was this surplus in previous years prior to the 10 years prior to that. There would be the spend down of supplies that would happen at the end of the school year in preparation for the next year. That was sort of and we discussed that and said it was probably best that not happen in this kind of frantic way. You wouldn't, and rather have this relationship in it. And I thought it worked really well for a long period of time. And then COVID hit, and we had this a lot of unexpected dynamic, right? And a lot of large costs coming. We weren't sure, blah, blah, blah. And I remember one of my colleagues here talking, let's establish this non-lapsing account. So if there's a surplus, it could carry over to the prior year, from the prior year to education, specifically to the next year. And I think what happened with the surpluses was there was a trust sort of that built up over time, and it really was a wonderful dynamic. And when I talked to colleagues across the state, they were amazed that happened. And there was and there was an understanding that the budget was coming in at a level that was allowing for some of that surplus, and it would go back to the town. But there was this kind of understanding, and so anyway. But we went to the non-lapsing account, and then sort of nothing for the last couple of years. So I guess one of my questions is, how is the budget going this year, and where do you stand? That's number one. And number two, is it something that you would entertain? The non-lapsing account was really related to COVID. There's more predictability in expenses now, and how do you envision that working?
I appreciate the question, Madam Mayor. I can't speak necessarily. I might need some time to think that through. I feel like I've had some previous conversations with my budget director, and I know that we saw the purpose in the non-lapsing. I think our preference would be to be able to return money to you. I know that in the last couple of years, like, it was a very difficult year last year, as you know, and the biggest part of that kind of came toward the end of the year where, we're always kind of going on the good word, like excess cost. We were anticipating, and we had put into our budget last year at the 85%. And then at the end of the year, as we got toward the end of the year, state kind of said, okay, yeah, well, we're only going to have 74% available. And that created a significant shortfall for us. And I know that even within that whole budget process, the town council was extremely supportive of the schools, but it really explained the fact that I know it was like a nominal amount that we were able to give back, but we did still think that it was important that we find some dollars that we would be able to have to be able to be able to present back something to the town at the end of the day. And I fully recognize that last year that was not in any way, shape, or form as significant as it's been, but it was really and truly a reflection of budget conditions that had occurred. We're in this boat this year. We're told we're going to get 68% back. That's a significant driver. We've also had a number of things, that you can't always necessarily predict for in your budget in terms of individuals who are out on long-term absences. And so you're paying for them, but at the same time you have to backfill, and so you're paying 2 salaries for 1 spot. We've seen an increase in that over the last 2 years with a number of folks who have been out for various reasons, typically medical reasons. And so the budget itself has not been without its struggles. We're doing okay. There was a point that just fell out of my head that I wanted to bring up. I'll retrieve it. But at the end, I appreciate the fact, and I'd like to be in a position where we're able to give those things back. But one of the things that we've seen, in specific with this 5.8, is we're attempting to create the budget that has, given that it has a number of positions that we're trying to add to it, given the fact that the tuition costs have increased so significantly, that the insurance costs have increased so significantly, we're trying to be as prudent as possible, not having significant things in there that would otherwise just drive up the budget. We're trying to find the savings for you on the front end so that we can have a palatable budget. We work very hard to get to a 5.8 under 6 at an early point in the budget. And we've seen districts that have this, that have 8% budgets, 7% budgets. There are some out there that have double-digit budgets. We thought we might be coming in near an 8 when we very, very first started this, and we had a number of more favorable estimates that came through. One of the ways that we will continue to try to find those savings and make those adjustments on the fly is whenever we have a position that gets vacated. So typically, if a position is vacated, certainly a classroom position, we're filling that. But any position that's outside of the classroom, we've been doing this for the last 3 years. If that position becomes vacated, we're holding that vacancy open. And we're waiting until the next budget cycle to say, is this, certainly it's something that we value, but is it something that we can work around? Because oftentimes we are in need of finding those savings, and whether that's just a savings to get us to even by the end of the year, or whether that's, okay, we lived without it this long, do we really need it? Kind of a question, and what do we lose by not reinstating it? And those were a lot of the conversations that drove, as you saw, the elimination of 23.58 positions prior to adding in 5 special ed and maintaining 9 from the ESSER. So I don't know if that answers everything that you asked me, but I do hope that there's still that same trust. I know I'm coming in new. But I've been in the district for 30 years, so I'm well aware of the positive relationship that we've had, and I only want to continue that and enhance it.
Thank you. And I just have, whoa, all of a sudden, I know. I just have one more question. So when it was, you were a self-insured program, as we were, and there were, and I remember them very well, some of those really, really difficult years, and fluctuations that you really didn't know what was going to happen. And there was, we would hold, we would really hope that, and the partnership has stabilized a lot of that, which is great. But I do also remember that there was reserves that were set aside for that volatility, and that volatility isn't there anymore. There's still some, obviously, we all have volatility, and we have it on the town side, and we just met with our rating agencies today, and they put a lot of emphasis on that. But what is the plan with that, and what's the balance, and how are you going to, what's the plan with that?
Certainly. I don't have the balance number off the top of my head. I can certainly get that for you, but I do know that we have been doing a planned kind of spend down on healthcare reserves. We do want to maintain something because while the volatility doesn't exist, we can have bad years where things do in one way, shape, or form impact in the following year in terms of the claims experience, so to speak. And while that is mitigated across the entire state partnership, I know that in the first years of the state partnership, we saw very, very low increases. And now now we're seeing things that are a little bit higher, as I think one of the questions came forward. Hey, where's the savings? I think you said it's at 6%, and how come it's still that high? I do think that it's better off overall, but I can get you kind of numbers, and if you're interested to kind of see how it's been stepped down and what that looks like moving forward, I can certainly get that for you.
Barry, go ahead.
Barry Walters, Town Councilor. It's my understanding that was, and maybe I'm completely off base and misheard, but it's $11.5 million in that reserve fund. So that's a pretty substantial amount of money to have sitting there. I'm just kind of curious. I mean, what can it be? If there are other things that can be used for, what are they? And I'm coming from a place of not knowing, so.
Yeah, I apologize, Barry. I don't have that number off the top of my head, so if I can get that to you guys, I'd be happy to.
Thank you. I'm sorry, just to expand on that a little bit. I guess the confusion on that fund, whatever is in it, is that a reserve fund, obviously, if you're self-insured, right, you get a bad claim, and you have to have the money for it. And it's obviously required in a self-insured plan. But we're now effectively in a fully insured plan. I mean, it's still considered self-insured because of the partnership is what it is. But we don't, and certainly the board doesn't have exposure to an extraordinary claim on the medical side. Obviously, we have fluctuations on both sides, all over the budget for other things. But I'm confused as to what even it could be used for. I think that was what Councilor Walters was getting at. I mean, like, is it, what else could it be used? I mean, if you have a shortfall somewhere else, can it be used other than for health insurance? Which, again, doesn't feel like something that would change from, because we know what the rates are from the state. So I guess I am confused as to what is it doing now with that money, and how does it help your budget?
No, I appreciate you guys are filling out the scope of question for me, so I will, as I said, I'll endeavor to get you an answer for that.
I'd appreciate it. Thank you very much. I'm looking around to see if anybody has any other comments. I don't see any. Lorna.
If I may say, and again, the we'll have more additional information to share in response to the inquiry and can understand why there's the question as to why. And again, I'm just going to approach it again from a higher level piece too, recognizing how challenging, and you all know this very well, the past 4 years has been, and recognizing that with what we're talking about financially in terms of how to support our district, we also know that as expenses continue to go up, the amount of compensation reimbursement that we are receiving, it continues to go down. And so with that inverse relationship, it makes it all the more challenging. We are looking to be in a place of being more predictable with that, and this touches on how to apply or how to utilize the reserve. However, we are in this period of trying to maximize stability and predictability. And so again, we'll have more specifics in terms of the funding that is there, but please know it's not a matter of just trying to hoard. It's a matter of, whoa, things have been unpredictable, have been, some may say, a hot mess, and we're just now just trying to get in a more settled, predictable, sustainable place.
Thank you. And now, again, if there's nothing else, I'll let you get the last word, except for this one, which is we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you all for coming, and again, thank you for the presentation.
Oh, are we able to say something before we? I didn't know if you were saying.
No, yeah.
That was your last word.
That was my last word.
All right.